I'm just advocating, I think, for nothing more than anything else other than let's see where we can take this salary cap next, because I don't think it's a healthy thing for the NHL to keep this salary cap in locked and loaded for as long as they have.
From The Sheet, one of the two best daily hockey shows on the planet. Jeff, how are you, my friend? Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, DJ. PD, what's going on, boys? Yeah, that made for a spicy Friday. Like, there's a number of interesting takeaways from this one. There's the actual trades themselves. What do you now think of Carolina, Colorado, and Chicago? Then there's the various philosophical debates about this that you can have, the nature of creative general managers, the nature of there are just some managers that look for solutions instead of roadblocks. And then I think, which is another interesting conversation, is it maybe time we took the training wheels off the salary cap now with the CBA set to expire? So this has kind of become a touchstone moment, I think, for a lot of these conversations.
Talk about the training wheels of the salary cap.
Well, listen, the salary cap came in 2005 after the great lockout of 04-05 that wiped out an entire season. And since then, basically, there have been like minor tweaks and minor adjustments. It's been the same cap. It's been the same cap that we've worked with. And, this is still the salary cap with training wheels. But isn't it time maybe now that this salary cap started to walk and, get out of the stroller and start to move around a little bit? Like, we move essentially with the same salary cap going back to 2005. Is it time that we sort of, let the salary cap move a little bit and introduce things like, I don't know, franchise tags and do more creative things now that theoretically every general manager, every team knows how to maneuver within the confines of the salary cap? I'm just advocating, I think, for nothing more than anything else other than let's see where we can take this salary cap next, because I don't think it's a healthy thing for the NHL to keep this salary cap in locked and loaded for as long as they have. I think it's time for this thing to stand up and move around a little bit. If you're not going to dance with it, at least walk a little bit.
So it's not as much an issue with like the hard cap, or would you NBA it and introduce a lot of different like aprons and luxury taxes? Because luxury tax would be interesting to me.
It would. Like, there's a lot of things attached to it too. Like, essentially, I mean, again, like as an old Montreal Expos fan, I'm going to go back to the Expos essentially being a farm team for the entire MLB once upon a time. In this situation, like, I know that there's the internal cap discussion, and listen, I'm with you. I can't stand that. If you're going to look at it, don't look at the number, look at the percentage of cap when it's signed, but that's maybe a discussion for another day. All that I'm advocating for here in some ways is let's have different ways for teams to construct and keep the rosters that they've worked hard to build. Like, in a lot of ways here, teams like the Avalanche in this situation are being punished for being too successful at, drafting and the even bigger piece, developing players here. And because of it, they have to trade them off to other teams for, not for, a lump of magic beans. Like, they're getting really good players in return. But there is an element here of you get too good. We've seen this before: Chicago, LA, etc., Pittsburgh Penguins having to, that snake needs to shed some skin after they win a Stanley Cup. And I think that's always been unsettling, I think, for fans, certainly in those markets. And maybe it's about time that the NHL said it's time for a salary cap to grow up and actually reward teams for drafting and developing well.
Yeah, but you also have to consider that you're saying this as a smart person, whereas I'm a very dumb person. So as simple as the salary cap can get, I will take it so that I can understand it. I still don't even understand this one. So don't make it more complicated.
People of other leagues do say that, though. They're like, when the NBA was having their lockout, a lot of NBA people were like, you know what? Give it to the NHL. They've figured it out. And I was like, they have? And they were like, yeah. Everybody knows what they're talking about when they say, here is this contract, here is what it will mean. I have other thoughts, but I'll let you go on that.
Okay, let me throw another one on the table then, just as we're having this, Monday afternoon discussion about, the ramifications of all of this. How about this? One of the things that hamstrings deals, as we all know, trust me, everybody in Toronto is having the conversation now about what does this mean for Mitch Marner? All of a sudden, Mikko Rantanen's an Avalanche. What does this mean for the Maple Leafs? Do they need to try to make a move with Mitch Marner? He's got the no move clause. What does that mean? Look, like, how spicy was the weekend in the NHL? How much buzz was there created around the NHL this weekend because of this one massive move? And NHL trade deadline is now turned into, as we all know, NHL tweak deadline. It's harder than ever to make moves. If we're talking about caps, and I'm going to get into this, I think, a little bit later on the show, how about a cap on how many no move clauses each team has? Like, as we're all looking for where are the battlegrounds for the next CBA and how could the NHL look different, how about sort of, cap, if you're going to cap anything, cap no move clauses per teams. Maybe you only have 1 or 2 no moves, you have 2 or 3 no trades, and that's it. We'd love to offer your client a no move, but we're capped out. Just in order to, from a marketing point of view, encourage more movement in the league.
I like that. I also like making the no trade lists transparent. So fans can decide that they hate
what?
a
And
certain
players, so
player.
then players wouldn't want no moves in their
Yeah.
contracts.
I'll tell you what, boys. So that is, Pete, that's fantastic. Brian Burke would always tell me, and he'll tell you the same story to this day. When he ran the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he would never give me the name, but he would always say, you would be shocked how many Canadian hockey players have every Canadian market on their no move or on their no trade. No chance. Like, there's some players that embrace the chaos of playing in a Canadian market where there's no such thing as an 82 game season. It's 82 1-game seasons. Some players thrive on that. Others want to keep that at arm's distance as much as they can. I would love it. I think it adds a whole new layer and dynamic to, who wants to go where and why. I just know that would make, Pete, I think that would make a lot of Canadian hockey players specifically very nervous, especially the hometown kids. What do you mean you don't want to play from the Maple Leafs? You're from Mississauga, or you're from Belleville, you grew up in Newmarket, and you don't want to play for the Maple Leafs? I think it would be a fascinating yet highly improbable thing that we ever see in the NHL.
If you know anything about
you for
me,
bringing it up.
If you know anything about me, all I live for is making Canadian players uncomfortable and nervous. So
Yep,
that would do it. On that idea.
That would do it. Listen, I mean, how many French Canadian kids would not want to go play for the Montreal Canadiens? We saw this play out with Vincent Lecavalier when, there was all that discussion about him going from the Bolts to the Montreal Canadiens, and he was swarmed at the All-Star game, and everybody thought it was going to happen before his no trade kicked in, and he was terrified of being moved from Tampa to Montreal. How many Quebecois kids don't want to just go and play for the Habs for that very reason? They don't want the 24/7-ness of their career splashed out in newspapers. And as Brian Burke would say, when you play in Montreal and you have a bad game, you're bad in 2 languages. Like, when you're a manager in Montreal and you make a bad move, you're dumb in 2 languages. There's a lot of French Canadian hockey players that would say, thanks, I'm okay. I don't really want to go home to play.
If there were something like bird rights or any of the mechanisms that allow, say, NBA teams to keep their own players more easily, do you think that those would be exercised and utilized as much in the NHL anyway? Because I'm still thinking that owners would kind of stay on the way they are right now, which is like, I'm not paying X amount of guys this much money.
I think that's a really good question. I think that depends owner to owner. And I'll give you an example. Like, there are just some owners that, we'll all say the proper things about the salary cap and respecting the salary cap and how it's a necessary mechanism for the entire ecosystem of the NHL to not just survive, but to thrive, competitive balance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anytime I get to interview an owner, and the last one that I did was Bill Foley with the Vegas Golden Knights when I was doing the pod with Elliot, I said, if there was no salary cap, what would you pay your team? And I think the number he rattled off was like $150 million. Like, there are just like some owners that they just want to win. Like, that's the only thing that they're driven by. In the last years of his life, if you asked Ed Snyder in Philadelphia, how much would you pay, Ed, for one more Stanley Cup before you pass away? Like, what would the number have been for Ed Snyder? Like, I think for every organization, there would be a different number. So I don't know that I could paint with a roller on that one. To have to be a finer brush as I give you an answer. But I do think that there would definitely be some teams that would say, you know what, we're still in our competitive window. It doesn't matter how much I'm going to pay here, long term and short term, it's going to pay off. So I'm happy to pay this guy the number that he commands.
And in fairness to NHL owners, because I just kind of cast aspersions there, it doesn't equate or translate perfectly because the rosters are so much bigger in the NHL. So if you did that, maybe you would do you could have 2 of those where you can go over the maximum percentage, the maximum percentage of the cap. But again, in the NHL, no one's going to the maximum percentage of the cap anyway on players.
Isn't this though, we just the last 5 minutes to me are fascinating. And I think that does wink at, what we mentioned off the top. And that is the salary cap can do so much more and add another layer of intrigue into the NHL that we haven't seen in some time. I'm always curious I don't know about you guys, but I always like forcing people or teams to make decisions, right? That gives you, in intrigue, and that raises the level of excitement around the NHL. This is what trade deadline does, right? We all have our eyes on 3:00 Eastern. That's okay, you're forcing a decision, and here's where the time runs out. Okay. And all of these conversations now, what we're doing, just adding another layer of intrigue and discussion points. And the more you can get people, I think, talking about your league, that's the best marketing you can do, is people having the same discussion that we're having right now. And I assure you, this discussion was being had amongst a number of fans, and whether it's their group chats or at the saloon or in adult league dressing rooms and amongst parents watching their kids. That can only add to the interest of hockey. I've always believed that a couple of things. Draft lists are marketing, and I also believe that draft talk is marketing as well. Even if nothing really happens on trade deadline day, just the buzz around it and the conversation around it is valuable to the NHL, because it gets people in the mental space of talking about the possibilities for all these teams. And I think the more that you can introduce sort of intangibles and other things to consider, I think it's only better for hockey.
We all silly like the mayor.